Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, we had started a new chapter, Nationalism in India. Nationalism meaning feeling of a nation, feeling of oneness. Indian nationalism developed as a concept during the Indian independence movement fought against the colonial British rule. In this chapter, students will get to know the story from the 1920s and study about the non-cooperation and civil disobedience movements. You will also get to explore how Congress sought to develop the national movement, how different social groups participated in the movement, and how nationalism captured the imagination of people. Now, as you very well know, after the downfall of the Mughal emperor and after the Marathas lost the Battle of Panipat, the Britishers had finally, become the supreme power in India. Right? They have taken control over the Indian administration, they have taken control over the Indian governance, and they have taken control over the resources of India. After the Marathas lost the Battle of Panipat, there was a turning point in the history of India, and India went into a 200 years of colonialization. India went into 200 years of slavery under the British Raj. The first revolt, the first major outbreak which took place against the Britishers was in 1857. Though the revolt failed as it lacked unity and it lacked proper planning, right? But still, it was one of the major revolt, in history, which was against the British Raj. After that also a lot of revolts have taken place, right? A lot of voices have been raised, but all these voices, all these revolts were successfully suppressed by the Britishers, right? Indians kept on struggling, Indians kept on saying, but in one or the other way their revolts failed until Mahatma Gandhi arrived in India, right? When Mahatma Gandhi arrived in India, the very first thing, which he observed and which he made people understand was unity. He said, for bringing out a mass change, for bringing out a change, a mass revolution is required. And for a mass revolution, there should be unity among the people of India. So Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in 1915. He had come from South Africa, where he had successfully fought the racist regime with the novel method of mass agitation, which he called Satyagraha. Satyagraha means truth alone triumphs. The idea of Satyagraha emphasized the power of truth and need to search for truth. It suggested that if the cause was true, if the struggle was against injustice, then physical force was not necessary to fight the oppressor. Without seeking vengeance or being aggressive, a Satyagrahi could win the battle through non-violence. Then we had gone through another slide which was on the Satyagraha. This could be done by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. People, including the oppressors, had to be persuaded. Means we have to hit on their conscience, we have to hit on their inner soul, so that they can look over what the truth is instead of forcing them to accept, right? We have to make them understand the importance of truth. By this struggle, truth was bound to ultimately triumph. Mahatma Gandhi believed that his dharma of non-violence could unite all Indians. After arriving in India, Mahatma Gandhi successfully organized Satyagraha movements in various places, and the very first one was in 1916, right, which was held in Champaran in Bihar again, and it was a peasant revolt against the indigo plantation system. Now, new economic situation. Now, as you know, this struggle was going on. There was that was the period of 1915 with when Mahatma Gandhi had come to India. 1916 he has launched the Satyagraha movement, right? 1916, 1918 he was, he was slowly and slowly, traveling to different places, and he was telling people, preaching people about the idea of Satyagraha. And 1914 to 1919 is also the period of First World War. Though India was not directly involved in the First World War, but since India was under the rule of the Britishers, India was colonized by the Britishers. Right? India was under the rule of the Britishers. India was under colonization. Britishers were ruling India, and Britain was a part of First World War. So it indirectly impacted the Indian resources also. It indirectly impacted the Indian economy as well, and it indirectly impacted the people of India, right? To meet the war expenses, what happened? The taxes, heavy taxes were put on Indian people, right? Indian people had to pay double taxes. Why? Because Britain wanted to meet the war expenses. When Britain army felt there are no there is a requirement of more soldiers, people from India, people from villages from India, they were forced, forced recruitment was done, and they were forcibly sent into the world war. So the First World War created a new political and economic situation in India. It led to huge increase in defense expenditure. Custom duties were raised. Income tax was introduced to finance the war. Villagers were called upon to supply soldiers. Forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread resentment. Prices of essential commodities doubled between 1913 and 1918, leading to extreme hardship to the common people. In 1918, 1919, 1920, 21, crops failed in many parts of India, resulting in acute food shortage. Influenza epidemic spread. According to the census, in 1921, 12 to 13 million people perished uh, due to famines and epidemics. 12 to 13 million people, a huge strength, right? They were affected by famines and epidemics. So, this was the new economic situation in India created by the First World War, economic as well as social. Why? Because Britain was ruling in India. So, to meet the war expenses, unnecessary burden was put on Indian people. Whether it was in terms of whether it was in monetary terms, or whether it was the supply of soldiers. Now, what is Rowlatt Act? Rowlatt Act, which was launched in February 1919, legislation passed by the Imperial Legislative Council. The legislature of British India, means the law-making body. Imperial Legislative Council was a law-making body of British India, and Rowlatt Act was law passed in 1919. The act allowed certain political cases to be tried without juries and permitted internment of suspects without trial. What happened in Rowlatt Act was no four people were allowed to stand in group, right? And if any kind of no British sensed any kind of uprisal against them, British sensed any kind of planning and plotting is going against them, they used to arrest people, and they used to send them in prison for lifetime imprisonment was there without any trial, right? No trial, no cases, they were directly sent to prison. It was a kind of lifetime imprisonment if any four people were found in groups. Now, why was Rowlatt Act passed? Despite much opposition, the Rowlatt Act was passed in March 1919. The purpose of the act was to curb the growing nationalist upsurge in the country, means to suppress the feeling of nationalism which was arising in the country. Mahatma Gandhi, among other Indian leaders, was extremely critical of the act and argued that not everyone should be punished in response to isolated political crimes. Now, Mahatma Gandhi said, not everyone should be punished for the act performed by few people. Not everyone, and that too, people should not be sent in prisons without any trial. Hearing, people should have the right to present their side. People should have the right to present their point of view in front of the government. A proper trial should go on so that the truth can be brought in front of the court. So Mahatma Gandhi, among other Indian leaders, was extremely critical of the act and argued that not everyone should be punished in response to isolated political crimes. The Rowlatt Act, which was framed in February 1919, and finally it was brought into action in March 1919. Now, class, what you will do is you will go through these slides once again. If any kind of confusion is there, you can raise your queries on your WhatsApp group. And also your homework for today is you will give a pictorial representation of the true idea of Satyagraha. A pictorial representation of the true idea of Satyagraha. This is your homework for today. Thank you.